actually see, one here I'm gonna take, it's really ironic this person asked this. What is your review of the movie Conclave?
The Pope is dead.
The throne is vacant.
Now, some may have heard Ben Shapiro came blazing out of the box, attacking this thing. It was an attack on Catholics. It was promoting transgenderism, and it was an insult to Catholics. Well, it's a good reminder, I think. Just you got to be careful with Ben Shapiro. I mean, he says some good things. He's funny, he's entertaining, but he's definitely not on the right page. So actually, last night on the plane, I was flying back, and I was done on my work, and I was like, "Oh, what am I gonna do?" And I saw this was available, so I'm like, "You know what? Let me just see if Shapiro's right." So I actually watched it. It's interesting. I think it is an accurate representation of what's going on in the church. Now, it is based on a novel, and as far as I can tell, it's pretty faithful to the novel, with one interesting change. So the premise of the movie is the Pope dies, and in the novel, he suggests it's John Paul II, the original novel. It doesn't say it directly, but there's sort of a sense of it. But this in the movie, they make it Pope Francis. It's clear he dies in the Santa Marta. He's in the room in the Santa Marta. And he has glasses that are lit sitting on his bedside table, like exactly like Pope Francis, and some other comments added in the movie. But what it's about the conclave that comes upon this death of the Pope. And two things go on in the conclave. One is there's kind of a battle between traditionalists and liberals. There's a liberal faction that's trying to get, I think, who's supposed to be an American cardinal, but he might be Italian. It's hard to tell. It's like some of the Italian cardinals have American accents and some have Italian. But he's like trying to get elected to push beyond Pope Francis. Like his idea is Pope, and they don't call him Francis. They say the late Holy Father. It broke all these barriers. We need to go further. And there's the Patriarch of Venice, who is basically saying we need to go back to the traditional mass. We need to stop welcoming Muslims and acting like all this ecumenism. Now, the sad part is there actually is no cardinal like that in the church, but it sort of shows what would it be like if there are these factions in the church trying to see where the church is going to go. And again, the arguments for the Venetian cardinal are interesting. One point, they're having dinner in the dining room of the Casa Santa Marta, and he says, "Look around. We're all divided." He said, the English speakers are over there. We Italians are speaking in Italian here. He's like, "Oh, and then the French." It's kind of funny. He's like, "Yeah, they're over there." And he says, back, with the election of John the 23rd, we would all be speaking Latin. We would all be here fluent in Latin. We'd move around tables. We'd all be able to communicate. We're all so isolated now. And it's actually a beautiful little, he says, back when we had the Latin Mass, this is what we had. So that's kind of interesting. The other interesting thing is I think it really exposes the actual corruption of the Curia, which we know is there. I mean, Archbishop Vigano, I mean, it's not defending the church or being a good Catholic to pretend there's not financial, moral corruption in the Curia, right? Vigano has told us there is moral, financial, sexual corruption throughout the Vatican. And the movie really shows that, right? They're blackmailing each other. And there's a cardinal, I think is supposed to be Arenze from Africa, who's very popular, but they sort of bring something to kind of embarrass him from his past. They fly this nun, like it is the what we know goes on in the Vatican. So I think that was all actually a fascinating, right? What is art supposed to be? So it's a reflection of life to get us to meditate, right, and think about what's really going on. I think it does that really well. Aside from the fact that the cinematography and costumes are beautiful. It is beautifully filmed as a movie. The way they film it, and apparently they weren't allowed in the Vatican, so they couldn't do it on site. But it is beautiful. The Sistine, and I actually found this a little. I don't know if the film had some traditional Catholicism behind it, but what was interesting is for the first mass of the conclave, you see a beautiful scene where the dean of the college vests beautiful vestments. They're not cheapo Novus Ordo stuff. And again, very, very beautiful. And I'm like, they're going to ruin this. He's going to go out to a Novus Ordo. They cut it. They don't show a Novus Ordo. They actually show his sermon. So he's standing up giving a sermon, but that's it. And I was like, oh, yes, I don't have to watch a bad Novus Ordo. Um, and they're Latin. They actually do some of the formulas in Latin. They're Latin. Unlike I hate movies when they butcher the Latin because they like they'll bring in cultural representatives for every Muslim thing, but who cares if we butcher the Latin? But it was actually beautiful. So I want to get to the last thing, the elephant in the room. It is actually not about transgenderism. So spoiler alert, I'm going to spoil a surprise in the movie. So cover your ears if you don't want to hear it. What Shapiro rants about is that they elect a transgender pope. Is what he says is the punchline of the movie. It's not actually that way. It is an interesting kind of dilemma they create at the end, where it's sort of you're left hanging, like, what do they do? They discover after the election that this cardinal from Afghanistan is a hermaphrodite. Now, hermaphrodite is a sort of what St. Thomas would say a destruct or a degeneration or a mistake in nature, right? That nature does cause, right, things to happen that are not natural, that are not normal, right? People are born. There are some people born with seven fingers, right? And people born missing a limb. These are parts of original sin that nature is corrupted and nature does fail, right? So there is a very extreme rare thing where person is born with a particular chromosome, but they manifest their body actually contains some, and it varies a little bit, gametes of the opposite sex. So they may have a mixture of genital organs in their body, and it is something that's happened throughout history. It's extremely, extremely rare, and they're it is certainly not part of the transgender movement, right? These are people who are not just born purely as men who just decide to change their mind. They're people born with a physical birth defect, right? And again, it is an interesting question, right? Would they be fit matter for ordination, right? I don't think the church has ever had to face that, but it is a sort of interesting question. Are they, if they are born with these defects, probably traditionally would be no, because frankly, you're supposed to be an alter Christus. Any serious manifested defect is an impediment to, if you're missing fingers or you're deaf, is an impediment really to ordination. But still, it's not the same thing that Shapiro paints it out. It's not like a underground transy who's really a woman becomes pope. It most of the movie is about these other issues, but at the end it does create this kind of moral dilemma. And then the dean of the college just sort of doesn't know what to do. He's like, what is this? So I actually think it was, I mean, not it wasn't a traditional Catholic movie. It wasn't like Catholics, that movie that from the 70s. It's fantastic. But I actually don't I think it was a beautiful movie. I think it does promote the ceremony of the old Catholic Church through the conclave, through its beautiful cinematography, and it does present really interesting issues about the moral corruption in the curia and the church, and how are we going to get out of it, right? And the tension between the liberals who want more liberalism and an actual real traditionalist cardinal who we don't have saying, no, this is the solution. So that's my review. I actually think it was a well done movie.